A quiet Moscow suburb, a mother and her two young sons. What led to the unimaginable act that shocked a nation? The Galina Ryabkova case. A mother's unthinkable act, the fall of innocence. June 24, 2012. A quiet Sunday morning in Dolgoprudny, a residential suburb located just north of Moscow. Life in this high-rise neighborhood moved at its usual pace until an unimaginable tragedy unfolded. From the 15th floor of an apartment block, two young boys, 7-year-old and 4-year-old, plunged to their deaths. Residents heard a sickening thud, followed by screams. According to several eyewitnesses, the boys landed on the pavement outside their apartment building, their bodies lifeless and broken from the fall. Moments later, their mother, 27-year-old Galina Ryabkova, was seen calmly walking down the stairs, exiting the building. Bizarrely composed, she stood near the bodies and stared silently, drawing the attention of bystanders and neighbors who had rushed to the scene. Her lack of emotion was described by multiple witnesses as disturbing and unnatural. Neighbors, still reeling from the sight of the two small children on the pavement, recognized Ryabkova and were stunned by her demeanor. One resident later recalled that she made no attempt to flee, cry, or even speak. Instead, she stood quietly and watched. The family had lived in the apartment complex for some time and were not known to be problematic. Galina was described by some as an ordinary mother, though a few neighbors noted that she seemed reclusive and rarely interacted with others in the building. As emergency services arrived, the truth behind the horror began to emerge. This was not a tragic accident. Galina Ryabkova had allegedly thrown her two sons from the 15th floor balcony herself. The news stunned the country and sparked immediate debate about mental health, domestic stress, and child welfare oversight in modern Russia. What could drive a mother to commit such a brutal and deliberate act? And what warning signs, if any, had been missed? The truth unfolds. As the horror of the morning began to register, eyewitnesses provided chilling accounts to the authorities. Several residents of the Dolgoprudny apartment complex reported seeing Galina Ryabkova calmly ushering her two sons, ages 4 and 7, onto the balcony shortly before the fatal fall. According to court records and eyewitness interviews cited by RAPSI and UPI, the boys were not crying or resisting, which added a haunting stillness to the final moments before their deaths. In the immediate aftermath, surveillance footage from the building's elevator and lobby showed Ryabkova descending to the ground floor, composed and expressionless. A report by Crime Library notes how she stood silently among the gathering neighbors, watching the chaos unfold around her as paramedics and police rushed to the scene. When detained by police, Ryabkova reportedly offered a cold and matter-of-fact confession. In statements detailed by The Independent, she admitted to the killings, saying she was fed up with the responsibilities of motherhood and had made up her mind to get rid of them. She offered no visible signs of remorse or panic during interrogation. Digging deeper into her actions that day, investigators uncovered a disturbing earlier attempt on the boys' lives. According to News, Ryabkova had allegedly tried to electrocute her children in the bathtub by throwing in a plugged-in hairdryer. When that method failed, she resorted to leading them to the balcony hours later. The sequence of actions painted a grim picture. This was not an impulsive act, but one seemingly premeditated and carried out with chilling intent. Ryabkova was arrested at the scene and taken into custody for psychiatric evaluation, as the nation reacted in disbelief to the unfolding tragedy. In the mind of madness. As investigators delved into Galina Ryabkova's past, a troubling picture began to emerge, one marked by instability, strained domestic life, and untreated mental illness. According to reports by the Moscow Times, Ryabkova had a documented history of mental health struggles, including a suicide attempt prior to her wedding, suggesting long-standing emotional distress. While no formal diagnosis had been made public at the time, authorities indicated that her behavior showed signs of serious psychiatric disturbance. At the time of the tragedy, Ryabkova was reportedly planning a divorce from her husband, who was away on a business trip. As noted by both the Moscow Times and Crime Library, this period was marked by tension in the household. She had been left alone with the children and, according to some accounts, felt overwhelmed and emotionally isolated. Neighbors described the family's apartment as being in poor condition, an outward reflection, perhaps, of the chaos within. Exposed electrical wiring, cluttered rooms, and general disarray were observed during police searches of the premises. These environmental factors added to the portrait of a family under severe stress, one lacking proper support or intervention. The precise motive behind Ryabkova's actions remains hauntingly opaque, but from what investigators could determine, it was a tragic combination of emotional deterioration, domestic breakdown, and a chilling sense of detachment from reality that led to the unthinkable. The legal proceedings and sentencing. After her arrest, Galina Ryabkova was placed under psychiatric observation at the Serbsky State Scientific Center for Social and Forensic Psychiatry in Moscow, one of Russia's most prominent institutions for evaluating criminal responsibility. According to reports from RAPSI and the Moscow Times, forensic psychiatrists determined that Ryabkova had been suffering from an acute mental disorder at the time of the crime. She was diagnosed as being incapable of understanding the nature or consequences of her actions, thus qualifying for a legal defense of insanity under Article 21 of the Russian Criminal Code. On June 24, 2013, exactly 1 year after the deaths of her sons, the Moscow Regional Court ruled that although Ryabkova had committed the murders, she was not criminally responsible due to her mental condition. Instead of a prison term, she was sentenced to compulsory treatment in a high-security psychiatric institution. This form of sentencing in Russia is indefinite, subject to periodic reviews to assess the patient's mental state and risk to the public. The court heard that Ryabkova's mental illness had deep roots. According to earlier investigations, she had a history of psychological instability, including a suicide attempt prior to her wedding. Her mental state had reportedly worsened in the months leading up to the murders, possibly exacerbated by the stress of a pending divorce and her husband's prolonged absence on business. The sentencing stirred public debate in Russia, particularly around mental health and criminal accountability. Critics questioned whether justice had truly been served, while legal experts defended the ruling as consistent with psychiatric law. Some observers also pointed out systemic issues, noting that Ryabkova had not received adequate psychiatric care in the years before the tragedy, despite apparent warning signs. Her husband, whose identity remained shielded in most media reports, did not make a formal public statement during the trial's conclusion, though earlier coverage noted his visible distress and disbelief upon learning of the psychiatric ruling. Media outlets, like RAPSI, reported that the court allowed no appeal, and Ryabkova would remain under state medical supervision for as long as deemed necessary. This legal outcome marked a grim intersection of criminal justice and mental health, raising questions about early intervention, societal support structures, and the thin line between punishment and treatment in cases involving severe psychological illness. Was there a way to stop it? What compels a mother to cross the darkest threshold, taking the lives of the very children she once nurtured? In the case of Galina Ryabkova, the answer lies tangled in a web of untreated mental illness, emotional collapse, and systemic failures. As details unfolded, one lingering question echoed: could this have been stopped? There were signs: previous suicide attempts, deteriorating home conditions, and neighbors who sensed something was wrong. Yet, no intervention came soon enough to change the course of what became an unimaginable tragedy. The legal system recognized Ryabkova's mental illness, choosing treatment over punishment. But in doing so, it left many wondering, where does justice end and mercy begin? What are your thoughts on the Galina Ryabkova case? How can we, as a society, better support individuals silently battling mental health struggles before the consequences turn tragic? Share your insights in the comments below. Next episode, a family's dream vacation takes a haunting turn when a mother vanishes without a trace, leaving only questions behind.